Hey, what's up, Zoners? Welcome to the earliest waiver wire show on the planet. Are you, like me, and woke up to your star quarterback being too sick to probably play on Monday night? Or, hey, man, maybe all of your other star players are dropping like flies right ahead of the biggest game of the season. Well, hey, if you somehow miraculously get through this week, you will need some of these players we're going to be talking about today. Week 16, waiver wire show. I'm going to be telling you who to add and how much to pay for these people if you have any money left. If that sounds interesting to you, hold on for 7 seconds.
You can do it!
Hey, what's up, Zoners? This is Tyler, Big Turd Ward, and Banjo, the dog, coming at you live from my garage. And this is the Fantasy Red Zone. We have all of our notes typed out. I'm going to be sharing that with you right now. All right, let's start off with the running backs. I do want to remind people that I'm shooting this at the halftime of the afternoon shows, so some of these are incomplete. I have what I have up until the halftime. Also, Sunday night game, Monday night game. Look for more players to be added in the comments section. And hey, man, if it looks like I am missing somebody on this list, please comment down below. Waiver wires are super important, especially right now, and this is a group effort. First up, he's been on here before, Ty Chandler. Spend $100, dude. You've been saving all your money all year. $100 on this guy. I know you don't have $100, but blow it all, dude. 23 rushes, 132 yards, and a touchdown. 3 receptions for 25 yards yesterday versus Cincinnati. That was actually 2 days ago now. Dude, Madison is out. He's out, okay? So even when he comes back, Ty Chandler looks like the better running back. I've been saying that all year long, man. He's a 5th-round draft pick from last season. So Kevin O'Connell did draft him. Hey, host Detroit next week. They're giving up the 11th most rushing yards allowed over the last 3 games. Doesn't look like it after this last game. I can't remember who they went against, but they stuffed the run there at 120 yards per game. Detroit allowing the 3rd most rushing touchdowns over the last 3 games as well. Almost 2 rushing touchdowns per game, man. So Ty Chandler, look for him to be a running back 2 next week. Next up, Keaton Mitchell. He's been on here for like 10 weeks in a row or some crazy shit like that, dude. Still like available in 65% of leagues. $15 I'd spend on him. Outsnapped by Justice Hill last week versus the Los Angeles Rams. That was a tight game. Baltimore off the offensive line is generating 1.8 rushing yards before contact. That is best in the league. And then Mitchell gaining 14.2 yards per carry when getting at least 1 yard before contact. So theoretically, this guy should be getting, 140 yards every 10 carries. Dude, let's see. 7th worst fantasy football playoff. I shouldn't even put that in here. They're at San Francisco next week. They're giving up the 2nd fewest rushing yards allowed over the last 3 games. Terrible matchup. And they are also giving up the 2nd fewest rushing touchdowns over the last 3 games. 0.3 rushing touchdowns per game, dude. That's abysmal. All right, guys. Next up, Zamir White. $15 I'd spend on this fool. I did say before this game, if Josh Jacobs did not play, I prefer White over Abdullah. Hey, man, I have Abdullah on my team, though, just because that's all that was available. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Hey, 17 rushes for 69 yards and a touchdown. 3 receptions for 16 yards this week versus the Chargers. The big deal here was his usage, 68% of rushing share without Jacobs out with a quad injury. If Jacobs is out again, dude, Zamir White is going to be a good play next week at Kansas City. Kansas City allowing the 10th most rushing yards over the last 3 weeks at 123 yards per game. They're allowing the 7th fewest rushing touchdowns over the last 3 games at 0.7. So Zamir White, low end running back 2 next week. All right, guys, next up, Deonta Foreman. You're like, why the hell is he telling me to pick this dude up, man? $5 I spent on this guy. 6 rushes for -6 yards, man. You don't want this guy on your team? Let's go. He's on my bench right now. I think he got 0 points today versus Cleveland. Dude, Cleveland has been average against the run of the last 3 games, so seeing this is concerning, man. And Roschon did lead the backfield 5 for 36, and is worth picking up as well. I don't know which one I'd rather have. Roschon is the young rookie, and then Deonta Foreman, man, was great for me over like a 2-game, 3-game stretch, and I picked him up. He's been leading this team in rushing. Just look right now, dude. What? Leading the Bears in rushing yards this year and has 4 rushing touchdowns. The next highest amount of rushing touchdowns for the Bears is Secret Bagent, man. Tyson Bagent with only 2. They do host Arizona next week, and Arizona is giving up the 4th most rushing yards over the last 3 games at 156 per game. Arizona is also allowing the 7th fewest rushing touchdowns over the last 3 games at 0.7. So not a lot of rushing touchdowns, but you can run the ball against Arizona. Dude, Deonta Foreman, I'd still want him as a flex probably next week with all these injuries and running backs being so thin. Next up, dude, Chase Brown. $5 I spent on this fool. 7 rushes for 23 yards, 3 receptions for 28 yards. Today versus Minnesota. I say today, that was yesterday. 5th round rookie. Mixon still dominating snaps, 67% last week, 76% the week before that. So, hey man, the snaps are going towards Chase Brown. I think it was 13 touches Joe Mixon had to 10 touches Chase Brown had. So, dude, Chase Brown, he could be an amazing running back. Dude, there are so many points left on the field for the Bengals running backs over the last like 2 or 3 years. Chase Brown, dude, could be a top 5 running back, maybe even next year. So they are at Pittsburgh next week. They're giving up the 5th fewest rushing yards over the last 3 games at 85 yards per game. That's not great. Pittsburgh giving up the 7th fewest rushing touchdowns as well. So terrible matchup next week. But Chase Brown, dude, in the future, I think is going to be a huge deal. Next up, Trey Sermon. I think I picked him up on my team once. I drafted him when the 49ers picked him up in the 3rd round and then left him on the bench all year. Well, guess what, dude? He's playing now. Him and some guy named Goodson. I'd spend $1 on these dudes just in case Jonathan Taylor does not play, just in case Zach Moss does not play. 17 rushes for 88 yards this week versus Pittsburgh. And then Goodson had 11 rushes for 69 yards. But still, dude, Trey Sermon got all the work, or the heavy work at least. Moss left with an injury and JT out. They are at Atlanta next week. They are giving up the 12th most rushing yards. I mean, that's a little bit better than average. And then they are allowing the 3rd fewest rushing touchdowns, though, over the last 3 games at 0.3. So not a great matchup, but maybe a flex, low-end flex if both JT and Zach Moss don't play next week. Trey Sermon. All right, guys, real quick, some handcuffs you should think about picking up just in case these guys get injured and you can start them immediately. Dearness Johnson, man. If Etienne goes down, Dearness Johnson is going to be great. Tyjae Spears would be great without Derrick Henry, but man, they got stifled in the run regardless today. Kenneth Gainwell, of course, man, that schedule's so much butter, dude, so good, and DeAndre Swift hasn't been doing shit, so you have to pick up Kenneth Gainwell. Rico Dowdle would be better than Tony Pollard if you got that Tony Pollard usage. And then Jordan Mason, man, would be a running back, high-end running back 2, probably low-end running back 1 if Christian McCaffrey goes down. So pick these dudes up just in case. All right, guys, on to the wide receivers. Curtis Samuel, man, I spent $15 on this dude. As of right now, he was leading the team in targets versus the Rams while I was writing this. He led the team last week, whatever it was. He got that 100 yards versus Dallas, the only goddamn wide receiver to get 100 yards versus Dallas. He has a 75% catch rate. That is 5th amongst wide receivers, dude. He's got Sam Howell. And, dude, Sam Howell gets like 20 points a goddamn game, man. Young chicken eating Brett Favre. But the problem is they do spread the ball around in this offense. Eric Bieniemy, just like last couple seasons, for Kansas City Chiefs. They are at the Jets next week. And they are giving up the fewest reception yards allowed over the last 3 weeks at 129 per game. So, yeah, the Jets have the best pass defense. And they're giving up the 3rd fewest reception touchdowns. Yeah. So, Curtis Samuel, terrible matchup, dude. But, hey, low-end flex, probably wide receiver 3. Yes, that he is. Next up, dude, I've been talking about this guy forever, even when he had 0 receptions on like 5 targets, man. Noah Brown, $15 I spent on this dude. 8 receptions on 11 targets today for 82 yards, man, and he had a touchdown versus Tennessee. So Tank Dell out for the season. Nico Collins dealing with that calf strain. CJ Stroud will be back next week. He was not playing this week, and dude, Noah Brown still did well. We already know that Stroud and Noah Brown have a really good rapport together. Dude, they host Cleveland next week. Cleveland has been average, man, against the pass, 16th fewest over the last 3 weeks, 213 yards per game. But they're giving up the 5th most reception touchdowns over the last 3 games. Dude, Noah Brown. Huge game probably next week. All right, guys, if I want to make it to the next round in the fantasy playoffs, I need this guy to get like 30 points. Zay Jones, man, $5 I spent on this dude. 14 targets last week. That led the team. He also led the team like in red zone targets and splash targets, all this other crazy shit. Christian Kirk on IR with a groin injury. They were at Tampa Bay next week, dude. Tampa Bay can't stop the pass. 10th most reception yards allowed over the last 3 weeks at a 242. And they are giving up the fewest reception touchdowns over the last 3 games. That's not great. But still, dude, I am not afraid to throw the ball against Tampa Bay. Dude, Zay Jones, maybe in a high-scoring game down there in Florida? Somewhere in Florida next week? All right, guys, next up, I traded for this guy earlier in the year. Josh Downs, man, 3rd-round rookie. I was super hyped. He was getting hyper-targeted for like 3 weeks in a row, then got injured. Then he got hyper-targeted one more time, and that was it, man. $1 spent on him. 3 receptions on 3 targets for 19 yards versus the Colts this week. Dude, Michael Pittman Jr. took that crazy-ass hit. If you haven't seen it and you don't like violence, don't look at it, dude. So he's out with a concussion, probably going to be out next week. This guy is a third-round rookie, and drafted by Shane Steichen. He should be great. Should be great. They're at Atlanta next week. They're giving up the 14th fewest reception yards over the last 3 weeks at 212 yards per game. That is kind of just average. Atlanta allowing the third fewest reception touchdowns, man, over the last 3 games. They do have really good cornerbacks over there in Atlanta, so not a great matchup, but you got to throw the ball to somebody, man. And Josh Downs is as good a bet as any low-end flex next week. All right, dude, I actually traded for this guy at one point in the year as well. Jameson Williams, $1 I spent on this guy. 4 receptions on 7 targets for 47 yards this week versus Denver. Second on the team in targets. So that's his best finish of the season, man. He is a number 12 overall draft pick from last year. He's the fastest man alive, dude. Like, as far as many plays as he's played and as many times as he's hit 20 miles an hour, it's like the best ratio of all time, some shit like that. He is at Minnesota next week. 16th fewest reception yards allowed over the last 3 weeks at 214. That is average. And they're giving up the second fewest touchdown receptions over the last 3 games at 0.7. Hey, man, Minnesota defense has been great, but look what they just gave up to Jake Browning and the Cincinnati Bengals, man. Jameson Williams might be worth something next week. All right, guys, quarterbacks apparently are super important right now. Jalen Hurts owners out here. S in the day's D, you know what I'm talking about? 324 yards and 2 touchdowns with 1 interception this week versus Minnesota. I'd spend $10 on this dude. He's throwing multiple touchdowns in back-to-back games. He's averaging almost 26 fantasy points per game over the last 3 games, man. Jamar Chase might be out, so we need to monitor this. Usually he really depends on Jamar Chase. He's like, I don't care if that fool drops it 10 times. I'm going back to him the 11th time. Well, that has not been the case the last 2 weeks, I think. He is at Pittsburgh next week. They're giving up the sixth fewest passing yards over the last 3 weeks at 186 yards per game. That's not great. And they're giving up the 10th most passing touchdowns, man. So you can't really run. They're not allowing a lot of rushing touchdowns, but you can get some throwing touchdowns against Pittsburgh. And that's what Jake Brown has been doing, man, over the last 2 weeks. Hey, man, probably a high-end quarterback 2 next week. Hey, we got another quarterback, Gardner Minshew. $5 I spent on this dude, 215 yards and 3 touchdowns this week versus Pittsburgh. 20 fantasy points in 2 of his last 3 games. Problem here is Michael Pittman Jr. is out. He left with a concussion early, but that was, dude, like second quarter, and Gardner Minshew still did well. So maybe there is some meat left on the bone without Pittman even being there. At Atlanta next week, again, dude, 14th fewest, so that is average, and the second fewest passing touchdowns. So again, you can pass on Atlanta, you just can't get a lot of passing touchdown. All right, guys, the last person on this list, tied in, Hunter Henry. He did leave the game injured, I think, at the very last play or somewhere around that. 7 receptions on 9 targets for 66 yards and a touchdown today versus Kansas City. 2 touchdowns on 3 targets last week versus Pittsburgh, man. He does have a possible knee injury. They're calling it a thigh contusion, maybe. Dude, Bailey Zappi makes him happy, okay? So he has a connection with Bailey Zappi. You can see it when you watch these damn games. So, man, Hunter Henry, tight end 1 next week if he does play. They are at Denver. They are giving up the 9th most receptions yards allowed, so that's better than average. And they're also giving up the 7th most reception touchdowns over the last 3 games. That is great, too, at 2 touchdowns per game. Again, tight end Hunter Henry, tight end 1 next week. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching. If you disagree with anything I said, please let me know down in the comments. I can change my mind with new information. So hopefully you make it to the next round, dude. Hopefully I make it to the next round, man. As far as timely injuries go, holy shit, this was a bad year. Hopefully I earned a thumbs up. Hopefully I earned a subscription. If you're not already subscribed, man, we need your help. Please help us take this show to another level, man. We need your support. And this is Tyler Big Turd Ward, and I appreciate you.